Hello, I'm Kads and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be doing another edition of the free-to-play champion showcase. And as was voted on by you guys, my lovely viewers, in my latest poll on my community tab page, the winner was Varl the Destroyer. So yes, the champion, I think he's 4th or 5th in line in the Doom Tower hard secret room rotation. But nonetheless, Varl the Destroyer is going to be the focus for today. Now for the longest time, this champion definitely got overlooked. We didn't really see much of what he could do. And then people started to test him out in Hydra, which of course we're going to use him in today. And I think Chimera as well, but I'm not going to showcase him in that area today. But nonetheless, he is a very, very powerful champion, particularly in battles where you can go for a very long time and scale up his stats, as we'll see as we dive through his kit. So on the A1, pretty simple. Attacks from enemy and heals him by 30% of the damage inflicted. So that's nice. A little bit of self-sustain. Again, for longer fights, he can kind of keep himself alive just by doing damage. And he is a nuker, so of course he will do a significant amount of damage. So that will be pretty much a full heal most of the time when he takes a turn with the A1. The A2 here attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance when booked on a 3-turn cooldown of placing weaken and decrease attack. So these are very, very good buffs. You can deal more damage by placing the weaken, and you take less damage by placing decreased attack. And of course, you pair him with someone else who has decreased defense, and then you have your decreased defense and weaken covered, as well as protecting your team with decreased attack. So a very, very useful combination of debuffs in the kit. But of course, that does mean that you will have to build him with accuracy depending on where you plan to use him. And then we have the A3, which is definitely my favorite ability to use because it hits so goddamn hard. But it attacks one enemy, will ignore 30% of the target's defense, and it will destroy the target's max HP by 50% of the damage inflicted. Of course, you're not really going to see that when we're talking about boss encounters, but nonetheless, in like faction wars and other stuff, wave content, he can deal a significant amount of damage and just kind of screw up their max HP. And if he happens to kill someone, he will also place block damage on himself, which is a little bit more of that kind of self-sustain. So what makes him so potent in longer battles is of course the passive here. So it increases this champion's attack by 10% each time they use an active skill, and it stacks up to 100%. So he doubles his damage just by using active skills. And for those who don't know, your A1 is a basic skill, and like the A2 and the A3 are active skills. So essentially you just need to use your A2 and your A3 enough times, 10 times I guess, and then you will have double attack for the rest of the fight. So that is where you can really get snowballing once you get a couple of turns in and start stacking up the damage and really start hitting really, really hard, as we'll see. So a nuker with some debuffs. So it's pretty straightforward what his kit is. And let's talk about the build that I have him in for today. So we have him in lethal and perception. Ideally, he would be in 6-piece merciless with 2 pieces of perception, but beggars can't be choosers, and I don't have that gear. So he is just in some pretty not my best lethal gear, but decent lethal gear, because of course he is on one of my Hydra teams, which I do run every single week. So let's go through. Actually, we'll take a look at the total stats first. But 41,000 on the HP, 7k on the attack, so pretty high on the attacks, 2,700 on the defense, 216 on the speed. So he's not built very, very quickly. He doesn't necessarily need to take a lot of turns, especially when it comes in for Hydra. You don't really want to take a bunch of turns because you just hit the turn limit faster. So slower is better, as we'll see with the boots that we'll take a look at here. But full crit rate, 229 on the crit damage, and then 322 on the accuracy, which is enough for the level of Hydra that we were doing, which is hard Hydra. So if we take a look through all of the gear pieces, we have an accuracy banner with some speed and some attack, a little bit of HP, but I guess a flat attack as well. So really perfect banner for this type of build. We have crit damage on the amulet with triple accuracy roll, so more accuracy, more a flat attack as well. And then we have the ring here, attack ring with a triple attack roll. Perfect. That's exactly what you want to see, and it happened to get the attack on the Ascension as well. On the boots, hinted at it earlier, but we do have attack percentage on the boots. So we don't again, we don't necessarily need a ton of speed on him, but you do want some, but you don't need him to be 300 speed or something crazy like that. But we have attack percentage of the boots, speed, crit rate, and crit damage with the flat attack as well. We have a 5-star piece, but it's just, beggars can't be choosers. Once again, this is kind of the best I have, but attack percent 5-star, but with some speed and some crit rate and a little bit of HP. We have some crit damage on the gloves, some speed, some attack, and a little bit of crit rate there as well. Then on the top pieces, filling it out, we have speed, crit rate, a little bit of defense. On the helmet, lots of crit rate, lots of attack, crit damage and a little bit of speed. Again, we don't need a ton of speed, so you can see we're indexing more on the crit rate to compensate for the lack of crit rate on the bottom pieces. And then on the weapon here, speed, crit rate, and attack, so finishing out the build. In terms of a relic, I do have a relic on him. Granted, it's only 2 stars, so it's nothing crazy, nothing that you probably can't achieve, but you obviously do have to have the Erethi Coronet. But of course, his damage increases by 1% for each time they place a debuff. He places decrease attack and weaken, so fairly quickly he will stack up to 30% damage, which is just, again, escalate the amount of damage that he can put out there. And as far as the gemstones, I just have a little bit of survivability, but bosses will do a little bit less damage to him, so he's a little bit tankier, but that's not really going to matter for the team, as we'll see in a bit. And then for the blessing, of course, to pair with the Erethi Coronet is going to be Nature's Wrath. So basically the exact same thing. For each debuff he places, he gets more damage, stacking up to a certain amount. And I have used essence or coins in essence in order to get him to the 3-star, and ideally I wanted to finish him out to 4-star, but some other champions have come ahead of him in terms of priority, so I'm missing out on the 30% crit damage, which is a little bit unfortunate. And then for the masteries, he is built more like a nuker, but more like a PvE style of nuker is kind of where I was headed with this one. But we do have the offense tree. Definitely want Heart of Glory. He's going to be full HP for the most part. Coming down the entirety of the left-hand side, I doubled back for Cycle of Violence just because in certain instances, a faction war wave, stuff like that, he can get that to proc. Obviously, it's not going to work against Hydra heads, but we're ultimately ending, of course, on Helm Smasher to ignore as much defense as possible. And then on the support tree, picking up basically all of the accuracy boosting stuff, coming through Lower Steel, and then ending on Master Hexer to, of course, extend the duration of the debuffs in his kit. So let's go ahead and see him in action in a Hydra team. So this is my default hard team, and normally I just quick battle this. I don't really have to watch it anymore. It's pretty safe and secure overall, but nonetheless, I'll go through the team composition here. We have Nekmothar in the lead. He's our decreased speed leech champion, a decreased attack as well, and turn meter fill, of course, is probably his primary thing, but he's also in a provoke set, so he's kind of our backup provoker. We have Rectored Wrath in there just to make sure that we have some healing, we have some veils, and we have a revive in case anyone happens to die. I have one of my Mishinakis in there who does a ton of stuff, but decreased defense, decreased attack, hex, buff strip, and the HP burn ally attack combo on the A1. We have Harima in the mix, just one of the better nukers, you know, another scaling champion, so we'll kind of see and compare notes once we get to the end of the fight, see how they do. And then we have Archbishop Pinthroy in there, somewhat of an underrated champion, but he fits in very nicely with this particular squad because he's bringing in block buffs for the squad, the primary block buffs champion, as well as some healing, some shielding, and increased defense for the powering up the Harima. That is his primary role, alongside synergizing with the block buffs. And then, of course, we're bringing in Varl for everything we said. So let's go ahead and run this. I will, you know, let it run for a little bit here, and then we'll fast forward with the quick battle, come to the end of the result. But the main thing I want to show is the damage potential that he can do once we kind of get the ball rolling here. So, of course, when you first start out, he hasn't used that many active skills, so you're not going to get any crazy numbers. But really, I guess the main thing you want or will want to see is when he gets his A3 off on a decapitated head. That's where you're going to see big numbers. Now, that being said, you know, like I said, he's not in Merciless, 6-piece Merciless or anything crazy like that. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that he's going to be doing, you know, millions and millions of damage. That's, you know, kind of whale Kraken type numbers. But nonetheless, I do think he can be serviceable for majority of people. So even there, that's one of the tankiest heads, and he did 300k. And again, we're just getting started because he obviously hasn't maxed out his potential in terms of scaling up his attack overall. So I'll come back to you guys once we get a little bit further in the fight, and hopefully we can get a decapitated head with some debuffs on them and then see what that A3 can do. All right, so we've got a couple of decapitated heads, so let's see if we can do a little bit of damage here. I think he recently used the A3, so we might have to wait a bit, and we might not actually get it on this particular cycle, but I might be able to show at least the A1. So there we go. On the decapitated head, 1 million damage. So I did say, I was joking a bit earlier that we might not see millions of damage, but that was just the A1. He hit 1 million on a decapitated head. Of course, there's decreased defense and weaken and all that stuff. But the one thing you might notice on this particular team, and it's just a shortfall of my champions at my disposal, I don't have increased attack. So he could be doing a lot more damage, but I just happen to not have a champion who is perfect for that one. You know, Duchess comes to mind to replace Rectored Wrath could work, and Glaecat of the Meltwater could do the same thing where they have, decreased or increased attack to improve his damage. He might use the A3 here. Actually, no, wait. Let's see. Oh, no, that was the A2. Darn. But I think on his next turn, we should be able, and that's actually perfect. We have decreased defense and the weaken. So Affinity should target this decapitated head, so we should be able to see big numbers here on this head. So let's focus there for a little bit before I start rambling on. But here we go, A3, boom, 1.2 million. So again, we're still not maxed out on his full potential in terms of doubling his attack. Obviously, he hasn't taken that many turns. We're only at boss count 20. But again, you can kind of see where I'm going with this, where like he'll get further or he'll get more and more powerful as the fight goes on, and we're still hitting, you know, close to 1 million with just A1s and A3s, and so it can really start to escalate very fast. Again, this is hard difficulty of Hydra, so you know the crazy numbers probably won't translate as easily up to Nightmare and Brutal. But on hard, he's one of the like perfect best champions for that. You'll get him eventually just by playing the game, doing Doom Tower hard secret rooms, and eventually, ideally, you'll put him into some sort of Hydra team. I think hard and brutal are kind of where he kind of caps out. But he just works. He's accessible, and you don't you don't necessarily need the craziest of gear to do a decent amount of damage. So like I said, he's in a lot of 5-star gear. He's not super fast. He doesn't have 400% crit damage, and yet we're still dropping you know 1 million-ish damage per hit, more or less, on decapitated heads. So it can add up, it can stack up, and he can definitely do work for your team. So let's back out and do a quick battle. I do have to run this key because it is the last day of Hydra. It's going to reset after or in a few hours. So this is my legitimate run that we're going to see here. And I think this team usually does around 250-ish million damage, give or take. We'll see. But like I said before, Varl is not under the buff of increased attack. So his damage could be a lot higher depending on the champions that you have. I just happen to not have a champion who fits in this team with the buffs and debuffs that I require, revives as well, that has increased attack as well. But nonetheless, you can see Harima with increased defense from Archbishop Enthroid dropping 95 million damage, which is pretty darn good. But Varl, without increased attack, dropped 80 million damage. So imagine him with increased attack, he'd be carrying the entire team. So he can definitely dish out a lot of damage. So I don't want to say that he's underrated. I think kind of the jury's out on him and what he can do. But if you have him and you're not using him for Hydra, you're definitely missing out, and he can do a lot of powerful things, a lot of damage, good debuffs, and just an all-around champion when it comes to these longer fights and longer battles. A quick insert here from Future Cads. I just want to be fully transparent here that I forgot to show my area bonuses. So I do have the benefit of maxed out ignore defense in Hydra battles, as well as speed and crit damage. So that is definitely amplifying some of the damage you saw in that particular team composition. So just bear that in mind. We do have a lot of ignore defense boosting on top of the Savage set, on top of the Helm Smasher. So if you don't have this aspect of your Hydra battles maxed out in the area bonuses, then perhaps you might want to think about War Master when it comes to the masteries on your Varl, at least in the meantime. But once you start pushing into, you know, Savage set, Merciless sets, and you have this maxed out in a Hydra fight, then you could definitely switch over to Helm Smasher just to ignore as much defense as possible. And of course, I could get even more damage out of him if I maxed out attack. I can get more damage out of Harima if I maxed out defense, etc. So there's more damage being left on the table for sure. But even then, I just want to be fully transparent that we do have some aspects of the super great haul here being maxed out to level 10. So as we talked about, Varl is fairly niche when it comes to utility in the game, and so longer battles are definitely where he will shine the most. So, you know, Demon Lord clan boss, Hydra clan boss, and Chimera clan boss is definitely where basically the only places he's really going to shine. But nonetheless, I have used him for sure in faction wars. Obviously the Orc Crypt is not open at the moment, but he's done a lot of work as just kind of a DPS. As we talked about with that A3, you're just innately ignoring 30% of their defense. You add in a Savage set, you're ignoring basically 50% of their defense. So it's a pretty hard hitting ability when it comes to that. Helm Smasher, of course, will take that a bit further. But point being, he can definitely work as a nuker, a single target nuker as far as the A3 is concerned. He can keep himself alive if he kills someone with the block damage or protect himself. So he can be serviceable, and I have used him even on Faction Wars hard mode, some of those stages as a nuker, and just a way to take less damage with decreased attack. And then of course the Cursed City, same thing. He's not going to control the waves. He's not a control champion, but he can be a decent nuker for the same thing, same purpose. And I guess for Cursed City, since there are, you know, waves, you probably get a decent amount of attack stacked up by the time you get to wave 3, but it's not going to be anything compared to, you know, longer term fights with the clan bosses. All right, so that is going to do it for the free-to-play champion showcase for Varl the Destroyer. And Destroyer is certainly right, as we definitely saw there. Basically on par with Harima, if not better than Harima, especially again if you pair him with increased attack in a Hydra team or potentially a Chimera team. Again, I don't particularly think he's that useful for like trials in terms of Chimera, but he can be a serviceable DPS, kind of, you know, in the same conversation as Ninja. Maybe not, you know, since Ninja's supercharged by Mikage, maybe not exactly the same thing, but he's one of those champions that has a scaling stat. So the longer the battle goes, the more attack he will gain, the more damage he will deal. As usual, the champions featured in these showcases are selected by you guys, my lovely viewers, so feel free to head on over to my community tab page on my YouTube channel after this video goes live and vote on the poll for which champion you'd like to see showcased next. Now, I will say, you know, upfront, a disclaimer, I am still working on the masteries for Empress as well as Marius. They have been recently acquired on my account, and they are going to be showcased no matter what. So you don't have to request them specifically, because they're not going to be in that poll, at least the one that I'm going to be posting next. But stay tuned for those. They are going to be coming soon. A little bit of sneak peek there, but they are coming soon in terms of the showcase of how I'm going to be using them on my account. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit that subscribe button down below as well if you are enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.